My 1969 Mustang was my grandfather's legacy. When my family sold it to fund my sister's lavish trip, they didn't just steal an object, they ignited a war for what was truly mine. The smell of gasoline and old leather should have been the first thing to greet me. It was my welcome home scent, the perfume of my sanctuary. For 3 years, that specific aroma meant I was standing in front of Ruby, my 1969 Ford Mustang Fastback. It meant peace. It meant I could leave the world behind and just focus on the satisfying click of a wrench, or the smooth glide of a polishing cloth over her candy apple red paint. But when I swung open the door to the garage after a grueling 2-week work trip, the only thing that hit me was the cold, sterile smell of concrete and a faint chemical tang of lemon-scented cleaner. The air was empty. The space was empty. And the gaping hole where my car was supposed to be felt like a hollow punch straight to my gut. You have to understand, Ruby wasn't just a car. She was the last piece of my grandpa I had left. He'd bought her brand new, the same year my dad was born. He'd taught me how to change the oil on her when I was 10, how to listen to the language of an engine, how to respect a machine built with soul. When he passed, he left her to me, not my dad. His will was specific. To my grandson, who has the heart of a mechanic and the patience of a saint. She'll be safe with you. She was a rust bucket then, a ghost of her former glory. My parents told me to sell it for scrap, that it was a money pit. But I saw what she could be. For the next 5 years, every spare dollar, every weekend, every late night went into her. I worked overtime at my engineering job, not for a fancy apartment or lavish vacations, but for a new transmission. For original chrome trim, I had to source from a collector in Arizona, for the perfect shade of period-accurate paint. I learned to weld. I rebuilt the 302 V8 engine with my own 2 hands. I stitched the new leather on the seats myself. My friends were out at bars, going on dates, and I was in this garage, covered in grease, with a smile on my face. The first time I turned the key and she roared to life, that deep, throaty rumble vibrating through the floor and into my bones. It was the proudest moment of my life. She wasn't a money pit. She was my legacy, my masterpiece, my connection to the best man I ever knew. So standing there in the unnervingly clean, unnervingly empty garage, my mind refused to process it. My first thought was theft. My heart hammered against my ribs as I fumbled for my phone to call the police. But then I saw it. On the workbench, right where I kept my set of specialty spark plug sockets, was a small, white envelope with my name scribbled on it in my mother's handwriting. A cold, icy dread, far worse than the fear of a random carjacking, began to creep up my spine. I knew. Somehow I already knew this wasn't a stranger's crime. My hands trembled as I tore it open. It wasn't a letter. It was a cashier's check. A check made out to me for $20,000. It was a decent amount of money, but for a fully restored '69 Fastback in pristine condition, it was an insult. It was a fraction of her actual value, not to mention the sentimental value, which was immeasurable. Tucked behind the check was a small note. We know this is a shock, but it was an emergency. Chloe needed us. We'll explain. Love, Mom and Dad. Chloe. Of course. My younger sister, the epicenter of all family drama. The black hole of our parents' finances and attention. While I was learning about carburetors, Chloe was learning about crystal therapies. While I was saving for a new paint job, she was draining my parents' accounts for a life-changing yoga retreat in Costa Rica that she got bored with after 3 days. Her latest crisis, which I'd heard all about in tired phone calls before my trip, was a total energetic misalignment that was stifling her creative spirit. Her self-diagnosed cure, prescribed by some guru she followed on Instagram, was a 6-week aura cleansing and soul rebirthing experience. In Bali, the price tag, she'd wailed, was astronomical. I'd laughed it off. I told my parents it was ridiculous, and they'd nodded with weary agreement. Or so I thought. I walked out of the garage and into the house like a zombie. The sound of cheerful chatter hit me from the living room. I followed it, the check crumpled in my white-knuckled fist. There they were. My mom, my dad, and Chloe, all gathered around the coffee table, sipping tea. Spread out before them were glossy travel brochures with pictures of pristine beaches and serene-looking temples. Chloe was glowing, animatedly pointing at a picture of a woman in a white linen dress meditating on a cliffside. And this is the sacred water temple where they perform the final chakra alignment, she chirped, her voice grating on my raw nerves. My mother looked up and saw me. Her smile was brittle. Oh, honey, you're home. How was the trip? My father wouldn't meet my eyes. He just took a long, slow sip of his tea. Chloe just beamed at me, as if expecting me to join in the celebration. The sight of them, so calm, so happy, so utterly oblivious to the hurricane of rage and grief tearing through me, made something inside me snap. The years of being the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who never asked for anything, the doormat, it all just shattered. I held up the crumpled check. My voice came out low and dangerously steady. "Where is she?" I asked. "Where is my car?" My mother's smile vanished. Chloe's face clouded over with a familiar, petulant annoyance. It was my father who finally spoke. He set his teacup down with a soft click, a sound that seemed deafeningly loud in the sudden silence. He looked at me then, not with apology or remorse, but with a kind of weary paternal disappointment, as if I were the one creating a problem. "Now, son," he said, his voice infuriatingly calm, "let's not overreact. We did what we had to do. It was for your sister." "Overreact?" The word came out as a strangled laugh, sharp and devoid of any humor. "Overreact? You sneak into my home while I'm gone, you sell the single most important thing I own, the one thing Grandpa left specifically to me, and you think I'm overreacting?" I took a step into the room, and the three of them flinched as if I were a wild animal. I felt like one. "This," I said, shaking the crumpled check, "this is what you think 5 years of my life is worth? This is the price tag you put on Grandpa's memory?" Chloe scoffed, tossing her perfectly straightened hair over her shoulder. "Oh my God, you're being so dramatic. It's just a car, a piece of metal. I was having a spiritual crisis and you're obsessed with a material possession. You need to check your priorities." "A spiritual crisis?" I leveled my gaze at her, a cold fury washing over me that was almost clarifying. "Your spiritual crisis changes every 6 months, Chloe. Last year it was the silent retreat in Arizona that you bailed on after 2 days because the Wi-Fi was spotty. Before that, it was the raw food pilgrimage in California that ended with you ordering a pizza to the commune. This isn't a crisis. It's a hobby. And this time, you paid for your hobby with my soul." "That's enough," my father said, his voice rising, finally showing a flicker of emotion. "You will not speak to your sister that way." "Or what?" I shot back, turning on him. "You'll sell my furniture? My tools? What's next on the chopping block to fund her next journey of self-discovery?" "We needed the money, and we needed it quickly," my mother pleaded, her eyes welling up with tears. It was her go-to move, the waterworks. For 28 years it had worked every time, but the well of my sympathy had run dry. Chloe was in such a state. Her therapist said a significant restorative experience was essential for her mental health. "Her therapist is a life coach she found on TikTok," I roared, the sound echoing in the suddenly silent room. "I told you that. I begged you not to give her any more money for this nonsense." "We didn't have the money," my dad said quietly, his eyes fixed on the coffee table. "Our savings are depleted. The car was the only asset we could liquidate that fast. It was sitting there, in the garage. You were barely driving it." The ignorance of that statement stole my breath. "Barely driving it? I just finished the engine rebuild. I was breaking it in. I was planning on taking it to the big auto show in 3 months. I told you that. Were any of you ever listening to a single word I said?" Silence. The glossy brochures for Bali seemed to mock me from the table. Chloe's radiant, spiritually aligned future, bought and paid for. "Who did you sell it to?" I asked, my voice dropping again, becoming dangerously calm. "I want to know who you called, who you led into my garage." My dad shifted uncomfortably. "It doesn't matter who—" "It matters to me," I interrupted, my tone leaving no room for argument. "Who?" He sighed, a long, weary sound of a man who knew he was cornered. "Mr. Henderson." The name hit me like a physical blow. Mr. Henderson from 2 blocks over. A smarmy, self-satisfied man who collected classic cars not out of love, but as status symbols. He'd been trying to buy Ruby from me for years, ever since I first started the restoration. He'd walk by the garage, peering in, making condescending comments about how I was in over my head. Every offer he made was a lowball, an insult wrapped in a compliment. "You've done good work, kid," he'd say, "but it's still just an old Ford. I'll give you 15 grand, take it off your hands so you can get on with your life." I'd told him, politely at first, and then much more bluntly, that he would own that car over my dead body. And my parents, who had heard me complain about him for years, had turned around and handed him the keys. For $20,000. They hadn't just sold my car. They had sold it to my own personal villain, the one person on the planet I would never, ever have sold it to. It was the ultimate betrayal. I looked from my father's guilty face to my mother's tear-streaked one, to my sister's, which was now a mask of pure entitled indignation. They didn't get it. They would never get it. They saw a solution to a problem. I saw a desecration. Slowly, deliberately, I looked down at the check in my hand. I met my father's eyes. And then I ripped it in half, and then in half again, and again, and again, until the tiny white and blue scraps fluttered from my fingers and scattered across the plush living room carpet like bitter confetti. "You didn't sell it," I said, my voice as cold and hard as steel. "You gave it away, but the transaction isn't complete." I turned without another word and walked towards the front door. "Where are you going?" my mother cried out, her voice laced with panic. "Don't you walk away from this. We are your family." I paused at the door, my hand on the knob, but I didn't turn around. "You proved today that you're not. You're just the people I used to live with." I pulled the door open, the evening air cool on my heated skin. "I'm going to get my car back." The walk to Mr. Henderson's house was only 2 blocks, but it felt like miles. Each step was a hammer blow, pounding the betrayal deeper into my bones. The streetlights flickered on, casting long, distorted shadows on the sidewalk that seemed to writhe and mock me. I could picture the scene perfectly. My dad, hat in hand, sheepishly explaining the family emergency, while Henderson smirked, smelling blood in the water. He'd have known he was getting the deal of a lifetime, and he'd have savored every second of my family's desperation. The thought of his greasy, self-satisfied hands on Ruby's steering wheel, of him showing her off at the country club as his latest acquisition, made bile rise in my throat. Henderson lived in one of those new money McMansions that had popped up on the older, more established side of town. It was all beige stucco and oversized columns, a monument to tackiness. His 4-car garage was his pride and joy, the doors always meticulously polished. As I rounded the corner, my worst fears were confirmed. There she was, parked in his driveway, not even put away yet, as if he wanted the whole neighborhood to see his prize. Ruby. The setting sun glinted off her candy apple red paint, the color so deep it looked like you could swim in it. She looked magnificent and utterly out of place, like a diamond sitting in a pile of gravel. A raw, possessive anger surged through me, so potent it almost made me dizzy. That was my car. I had bled for that car. I had poured 5 years of my life into every single bolt and wire. My parents had no right, no deed, no title they forged a signature on could ever change that fundamental fact. She was mine. I marched up the driveway, my footsteps crunching on the pristine paving stones. I didn't knock on the front door. I went straight for the source of the problem. Henderson was in the open garage, a rag in his hand, lazily buffing the fender of a sterile silver Porsche. He looked up as my shadow fell over him, a smug, triumphant grin spreading across his face. "Well, well," he said, his voice oozing condescension. "Look what the cat dragged in. Come to admire your handiwork in its new home." "You know damn well why I'm here, Henderson," I said, my voice tight. "This sale is not legitimate. My parents had no authority to sell you that car." He laughed, a short, barking sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, I think they did. Your father signed the title right over to me. All perfectly legal. I've got the bill of sale right inside, nice and neat." He tossed the rag onto a workbench. "Look, kid, I get it. You're emotional. You put a lot of work into it, and I appreciate that. You saved me a lot of hassle. But your old man came to me, desperate. Family trouble, he said. Needed cash, fast. I was just being a good neighbor." "A good neighbor would have called me," I shot back. "A good neighbor wouldn't have taken advantage of my family's stupidity to fleece me out of a car you know is worth 3 times what you paid." His smile tightened. "Business is business. You should have told your folks not to keep the title in their name if you were so worried about it. Rookie mistake." He gestured towards Ruby with a flick of his wrist. "She's mine now, and I gotta say, she drives even better than she looks. That V8 purrs like a kitten." Every word was a calculated jab, and they were all landing. He was right about the title. When Grandpa left her to me, I was just out of college, living at home. For insurance purposes, my dad had convinced me it was easier to just keep the title under his name on the family policy. I never thought twice about it. I trusted him. That trust now felt like the dumbest, most naive mistake of my entire life. "I want her back," I said, my voice low. "I'll give you your $20,000 back. Right now. I'll go to the bank." Henderson let out another wheezing laugh. 20,000? Kid, that was the desperate family friend price. The take it off your hands right now price. The market value on a machine like this, fully restored, We both know it's closer to 60, maybe 70,000. But for you, let's call it 75, just for the trouble. He was enjoying this, every single second of it. He was twisting the knife my parents had already stuck in my back. $75,000. I might as well have been trying to buy the moon. He knew it. I knew it. You're a parasite, Henderson. And you're a kid who got outplayed, he countered, his eyes glinting. Now, if you don't mind, I have a new baby to wax. Get off my property. He turned his back on me, dismissing me completely. That was it. That was the final push. The rage that had been simmering inside me boiled over. I wasn't thinking about consequences, about legality, about anything other than the burning, all-consuming injustice of it all. As he bent over his Porsche, I looked at Ruby, sitting there in the driveway, and then I saw it, hanging on a hook right inside the open garage door, just a few feet away, a set of keys. His keys, including the one to the house, the Porsche, his wife's Mercedes, and a newly added gleaming Ford key with the classic pony logo. My key. In a split second, a plan, insane and reckless, formed in my mind. I took a deep breath, my heart hammering like a drum solo. While his back was turned, I took 2 silent steps, snatched the keyring from the hook, and palmed the Mustang key, separating it from the rest. He was still humming to himself, polishing his stupid Porsche. I backed away slowly, my sneakers making no sound on the smooth concrete. I got to the edge of the driveway, my whole body buzzing with adrenaline. He still hadn't noticed. I had the key. My key! My car was 10 feet away. It was the dumbest, most impulsive idea I'd ever had. It could land me in jail, it could ruin my life, but the alternative, letting him win, letting my family's betrayal stand, was unthinkable. I looked at Ruby, then back at Henderson's oblivious form. There was no other way. I clutched the key in my hand so tightly the teeth dug into my palm. It was time to stop being a doormat. It was time to take back what was mine. My blood was roaring in my ears, a high-pitched thrum of adrenaline and pure, unadulterated nerve. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. Henderson was still humming, his back to me, completely absorbed in his Porsche. It was now or never. I slipped the Ford key off the ring, letting the rest of his keys fall silently into the manicured shrubbery beside the driveway. One less thing to jangle, one less thing to give me away. Then I moved. Not fast, not slow, but with a deliberate, predator-like calm I didn't know I possessed. I walked to the driver's side of the Mustang, my body shielding my hands from his line of sight. My fingers felt clumsy, thick with tension, as I guided the key into the lock. It slid home with a familiar, satisfying click that was drowned out by the frantic pounding in my chest. I pulled the handle. The heavy door swung open with a soft, well-oiled groan. So far, so good. He hadn't turned around. Getting into the driver's seat was like coming home. The worn leather molded to my back, the familiar scent of gasoline and vinyl filling my lungs, momentarily calming the storm inside me. For a split second, I just sat there, my hands gripping the thin, wooden steering wheel. I could see the reflection of the garage in the rearview mirror. Henderson was still there, a fat, oblivious toad in his beige kingdom. The ignition was the moment of truth. My grandpa's cars didn't have the quiet, polite cough of a modern engine. Ruby roared to life. There was no way to do this silently. I took one last, deep breath, shoved the key into the ignition, and turned it. The 302 V8 exploded into a thundering, guttural roar that shattered the evening's suburban tranquility. It was a sound of rebellion, a sound of righteous fury. Henderson spun around, his face a comical mask of shock and disbelief. His mouth opened, but whatever he yelled was swallowed by the glorious noise of my engine. I didn't wait. I slammed the car into reverse, my eyes locked on his in the rearview mirror. The tires screeched on the pavement as I shot backwards out of the driveway, the back end fishtailing slightly before I corrected it. I saw him start to run, his face turning a blotchy, furious red. He stumbled for a moment, looking for his keys in the shrubbery before realizing they were gone. That bought me a precious few seconds. I threw the gear shift into drive and stomped on the gas. Ruby leaped forward, her back tires smoking for a glorious, defiant moment before they found purchase, and launched us down the street. I didn't look back. I just drove, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my heart feeling like it was going to beat its way out of my chest. I was a car thief. I had just stolen my own car. The absurdity and the terror of it washed over me in equal measure. I could hear Henderson's distant, enraged shouts fading behind me. He'd called the cops, obviously. He had the title, the bill of sale. On paper, I was a felon who had just committed grand theft auto. I had maybe 10 minutes, an hour at most, before every cop in the county was looking for a candy apple red '69 Mustang. My mind raced, trying to figure out a plan. Where could I go? I couldn't go home. My parents would probably call the police themselves. I couldn't go to a friend's house and drag them into this mess. I needed somewhere to hide, somewhere to think. And then it hit me. Grandpa's old workshop. It was on the other side of town, in a semi-industrial area. He'd sold the business years before he passed, but he'd kept one of the back garages for himself, a small, windowless concrete box, where he'd tinkered in his retirement. The new owners of the main building, a small logistics company, had let him keep it for a nominal rent, more out of respect than anything else. When he died, the lease had passed to me. I kept paying the $100 a month, partly out of sentimentality, and partly because it was a great place to store parts and work on things without bothering the neighbors. It was off the beaten path. Nobody knew I still had it except for me. It was perfect. I took the back roads, my eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few seconds, expecting to see the flash of red and blue lights. But the streets remained empty, and I drove Ruby harder than I ever had before, the engine screaming its approval. It felt like she knew, like she was my partner in crime, eager to get away. 20 minutes later, I was pulling into the deserted alley behind the workshop. The logistics company had closed for the day. The only sound was the ticking of Ruby's cooling engine. I fumbled with the old-fashioned padlock on the roll-up door, my hands still shaking. With a loud metallic screech, the door rolled up, revealing the dark, dusty space inside. I drove her in, killed the engine, and pulled the door down behind me, plunging us into near-total darkness. I sat there in the silence, the smell of old oil and dust filling the car. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a cold, heavy reality. I was a fugitive, in my own car. I had the car, yes, but Henderson had the paperwork. Legally, I had nothing but a whole world of trouble heading my way. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. 23 missed calls. My mother, my father, and a number I didn't recognize, which I assumed was Henderson. And then a new text message popped up. It was from my dad. "What have you done? Henderson called the police. He's pressing charges. You've stolen his property. Bring the car back right now and we can try to fix this. You've lost your mind." I stared at the words. His property. Not your car. Not even the car. His property. In that moment it was crystal clear. They weren't on my side. They had chosen. They had sold me out for Chloe's trip to Bali, and now they were siding with the man who had gleefully taken advantage of them to save their own skins. They were ready to see their own son arrested to clean up the mess they had made. My anger returned, but it was different now. It was cold, sharp, and focused. They thought I had lost my mind? They hadn't seen anything yet. I scrolled through my contacts and found the number for my cousin, Mark. Mark was the family's black sheep, a freelance journalist who specialized in stories that made powerful people uncomfortable. He lived for drama and loved exposing hypocrisy. We hadn't talked in a year, but he owed me one. I'd co-signed on his first apartment lease when no one else would. I typed out a message, my thumbs flying across the screen. "Mark, I've got a story for you. Family, betrayal, classic cars, and a trip to Bali funded by grand theft. You're not going to believe it, and I have proof. Call me." I hit send. As the message delivered, a new idea, far more audacious and far more dangerous than just stealing the car, began to form in my mind. Henderson wanted to play hardball? My family wanted to call me a criminal? Fine. They were about to find out what happens when the doormat finally gets up and decides to burn the whole house down. My phone buzzed again, almost instantly. It was Mark. He had replied with a single question that made a slow, cold smile spread across my face. "Where and when? And tell me you have video." Video. Mark's question hung in the dusty air of the garage, illuminated by the cold blue light of my phone. I didn't have video, not in the traditional sense, but I had something better. I had a story, and I had the receipts. Every single one. "Not video," I texted back, my fingers flying. Invoices, bank statements, photos. A 5-year timeline of a restoration project paid for with my blood, sweat, and every spare dime I had. And text messages. Lots of text messages. Us. I thought of the endless stream of messages from my parents. "Can you lend us a bit for the property tax? Chloe's car broke down again. She needs $800. Just a little something to tide us over until payday." I had always said yes, transferring the money without a second thought. I was the good son, the responsible one. It was just what I did. I had also kept meticulous records for the car restoration. Every part, every can of Bondo, every custom chrome piece had a corresponding invoice saved in a folder on my laptop. I could prove, down to the penny, that the $20,000 Henderson paid was a joke. More importantly, I could prove it was my money, my labor, that had turned that car from a rust bucket into a showpiece. Mark called immediately. "Don't say anything else over text," he said, his voice crackling with the kind of manic energy he only got when he smelled a good story. "The cops can subpoena that. Where are you? Are you safe?" "Grandpa's old workshop. For now." I explained the whole situation, from the empty garage to the confrontation with Henderson, to the stolen car now idling its heat away in the darkness beside me. I didn't leave anything out. My sister's endless spiritual crises, my parents' financial enabling, Henderson's smug taunts. Mark was silent for a long moment when I finished. All I could hear was the frantic clicking of a keyboard on his end. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, this is good. This is really good. It's a classic David and Goliath. Working-class hero versus the rich schmuck and the ungrateful family. People will eat this up. But we have to be smart. Henderson has the law on his side for now. The signed title is a cannon. We need a nuke." "What kind of nuke?" "Public opinion," Mark said. "We can't win in a courtroom based on the facts as they stand. But we can absolutely destroy him and your family, if that's what you want, in the court of public opinion. We make it so toxic for him to keep that car that he'll be begging you to take it back." A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. My family? I don't know, Mark. As much as I was furious with them, the thought of publicly shaming them felt wrong. "They chose their side," Mark said, his voice firm, cutting through my hesitation. "They threatened you with jail to cover their own asses. There's no going back from that. You need to understand, they are not on your team anymore. It's you against them now. So what's it going to be? Do you want to be a good son, or do you want to get your car back?" He was right. The text from my dad, his property, echoed in my head. They had made their choice. Now I had to make mine. What do I need to do? Stay put. Don't answer your phone. Don't talk to anyone. I need you to get me everything. Every invoice, every photo from the restoration before and after shots are gold. Every text message where your parents ask for money. Lay it all out. Create a timeline. We're not just telling a story. We're building a legal and moral case file. I'm going to call a friend of mine, a blogger. She runs one of those big local news sites that always goes viral. She owes me. We're going to leak this, but we're going to do it carefully. We'll frame you as the victim, Henderson as the predatory vulture, and your family as the tragic, misguided antagonists. The plan was audacious, and it was terrifying. But it was also the only lifeline I had. "Okay," I said, my voice steady. "I'll get it all together." For the next 3 hours, I sat in the dark, the glow of my laptop screen painting my face. I compiled everything. The photo of me, 16 years old, grinning proudly next to the rusted-out shell of the Mustang the day it was towed to my house. The receipts for the engine block, the transmission, the thousands of dollars in bodywork. The bank statements showing the transfers to my parents, often on the same days I'd made huge purchases for car parts, forcing me to live on ramen for weeks. I found the texts from Chloe, alternating between demanding money for her latest whim and mocking my grease monkey hobby. As I pieced it all together, the full picture of my family's dynamic came into sharp, painful focus. It hadn't been a series of isolated incidents. It was a pattern. I was the reliable utility, the cash machine, the stable foundation they all took for granted. My dreams and my passions were secondary, dismissible, and as it turned out, liquidatable. The anger I felt was no longer hot and explosive. It was a cold, dense weight in my chest. A resolve. I emailed the zip file to Mark with the subject line, "The Nuke." He replied almost instantly. "Got it, it's perfect. The story goes live in the morning. Now for phase 2. You can't stay there. The cops will eventually figure out to check your grandfather's old places. You need to move the car, and you need a place to lay low." "Where am I supposed to go? I can't just check into a hotel with a stolen classic car." "You won't have to," Mark said. "I know a place. It's a bit of a drive, about an hour out of town. It's an old barn on a friend's property. He's an artist, kind of an anti-establishment type. He'll think this is hilarious. He won't ask any questions. I'll text you the address. Leave now, under the cover of darkness. Don't use the main highways." I looked at Ruby, her beautiful lines barely visible in the gloom. An hour's drive in a hot car with the police actively looking for me. It was a massive risk, but staying here was a bigger one. "Okay," I said. "Send me the address." The phone pinged with the location. I started the car, the roar of the engine a comforting, familiar sound in the oppressive silence. I cracked the garage door, peering out into the empty alley. It was clear. I took one last look around the dusty workshop, a place filled with memories of my grandfather, the only person in my family who had ever truly seen me. Then I put the car in gear and rolled out into the night, a fugitive heading towards an uncertain future, armed with nothing but a tank of gas and a folder full of receipts. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. I had lost my home, my family, and my good name. But as I drove, I realized I had finally found something I didn't know I'd lost: my backbone. The road ahead was dark, but for the first time in my life, I was the one steering. The drive was the most nerve-wracking hour of my life. Every pair of headlights in my rearview mirror felt like a police cruiser, every distant siren a prelude to my own arrest. I stuck to the winding country roads Mark had recommended, the Mustang's headlights cutting a lonely path through the inky blackness. Ruby handled the curves like a dream, her engine a low, steady rumble that seemed to reassure me. She was a part of me, an extension of my own will, and having her back, even under these insane circumstances, felt more right than anything else in the world. The address Mark sent led me down a long gravel driveway to a sprawling, dilapidated farmhouse with a massive dark red barn standing beside it like a silent sentinel. A single light burned in a downstairs window of the house. As I pulled up, the engine's roar echoing in the rural quiet. A tall, lanky figure with a wild mane of gray hair emerged from the front door. This had to be Mark's artist friend. He approached the car with a slow, unhurried gait, a half-smile playing on his lips. "You must be the car thief," he said, his voice a gravelly baritone. "Mark told me you'd be coming. Name's Julian. She's a beauty." He ran a hand gently over Ruby's fender, his appreciation genuine. "Thanks for this," I said, my voice hoarse. "I don't know what I would have done." "Don't mention it," Julian said, waving a dismissive hand. "Any enemy of the suburban bourgeoisie is a friend of mine. Bring her in the barn. She'll be safe there. No one ever comes out this way." He led me to the barn, and together we pushed open the massive groaning doors. Inside it was cavernous and smelled of hay, turpentine, and earth. Strange, large-scale metal sculptures, like robotic skeletons, stood covered in dusty tarps. It was the perfect hiding place. I drove Ruby in, and we closed the doors, shutting out the world. Julian showed me to a small, surprisingly clean, loft apartment above the main barn floor. It's not the Ritz, but it has a bed, a hot plate, and a shower that mostly works. Lay low. Mark will handle the rest. And handle it he did. The next morning, my phone, which I had risked turning on for a moment, exploded. Mark had sent me a link. The headline on the local news blog, the City Sentinel, was explosive. "Local man's classic car, a tribute to late grandfather, sold out from under him by family to fund sister's lavish Bali getaway." The article was a masterpiece of narrative warfare. Mark's friend had framed the story perfectly. It had the before and after pictures of the car, showcasing the incredible transformation. It had scanned copies of key invoices, proving the money and time I had poured into it. It had anonymized but damning text messages from my sister, whining about her stifled aura. It detailed my 5 years of painstaking work, my emotional connection to my grandfather, and Henderson's reputation as a predatory collector, known for lowballing desperate sellers. My parents were painted as well-meaning, but tragically misguided, manipulated by their demanding daughter. Chloe and Henderson, however, were cast as the unambiguous villains, but the masterstroke was the final paragraph. It mentioned, almost as an aside, that in a fit of grief and desperation upon discovering the betrayal, I had reclaimed my property, and that my current whereabouts were unknown, as I was reportedly terrified of legal repercussions from the wealthy buyer and his own family. It was perfect. I wasn't a felon. I was a desperate man pushed to the brink, a folk hero in a muscle car. The story went viral almost instantly. It was the top post on the local Reddit. It was being shared furiously on Facebook, and the comments section was a raging inferno of public outrage directed squarely at Henderson and my family. People were posting Henderson's address, his business information. They were calling him a vulture, a thief, a disgrace. My sister's social media, which she had so carefully curated to present an image of enlightened spiritualism, was being flooded with comments calling her a spoiled, narcissistic leech. Someone had even started a GoFundMe page, not to raise money, but as a petition to get Ruby back to her rightful owner. I spent the day in the loft, glued to my laptop, watching the chaos unfold from a safe distance. It was a terrifying, exhilarating, and deeply surreal experience. Every refresh of the page brought hundreds of new comments of support, new shares, new expressions of outrage on my behalf. People were invested. Ruby's story was their story of being taken for granted, of being the responsible one who always gets screwed over. Around 3 p.m., Mark called. "Are you watching this? It's a goddamn wildfire," he said, sounding giddy. "Henderson's business Yelp page is getting review bombed into oblivion. My source at the police department says the chief is getting calls from the mayor's office. This is a PR nightmare for them." "So what happens now?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Now we wait," Mark said. "We've fired our shot. The ball is in their court. Henderson can either double down and look like the biggest villain in the city, trying to get a poor, heartbroken kid thrown in jail, or he can cut his losses. My money's on him cutting his losses." Mark was right. Late that afternoon, a new development broke. A reporter from a local TV station had shown up at Henderson's house. The shaky cell phone footage was all over the internet. Henderson, looking harried and furious, was trying to get into his car while a reporter shouted questions at him. "Mr. Henderson, what's your response to the allegations that you knowingly took advantage of a family in crisis? Do you really intend to press charges against the young man whose car you bought for a fraction of its value?" Henderson snapped. He turned to the camera, his face puce with rage. "This is a private matter. I have a legal bill of sale. The car is mine. That delinquent is a thief, and he's going to prison. This is harassment." He shoved the camera away and sped off in his Porsche, but the damage was done. His angry, entitled rant was the gasoline on the fire. He had confirmed his role as the villain in the public's mind. The final piece fell into place an hour later. My phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering, a cold knot in my stomach. I put it on speaker. "Hello? What have you done?" she sobbed, her voice a complete wreck. "What have you done to us? The things people are saying. Chloe won't even come out of her room. They're calling her terrible, awful names. You've ruined us." There was no apology, no remorse, just accusations. She was still seeing me as the problem, not their actions. The last flicker of hope that they might understand, that they might be on my side, died in that moment. "You ruined yourselves," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "You sold my soul for $20,000. This is just the fallout. Mr. Henderson is threatening to sue us now," she cried, "for the damage to his reputation. He said you've made the car toxic, that he can't even be seen with it. He wants his money back. He wants to return the car." I felt a jolt, a surge of triumph so powerful it almost knocked the wind out of me. It was working. It was actually working. "He wants to return it?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Yes, but we don't have the money. We already paid the deposit for Chloe's, for her trip. It's non-refundable," she wailed. "You have to fix this. You have to call him and sort this out. Give him the car back. Apologize." Give the car back. Apologize. After all this, she still thought the solution was for me to roll over and surrender. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it was breathtaking. A new plan, cold and calculated, began to form in my mind. This wasn't just about getting Ruby back anymore. This was about making them understand the consequences of what they had done. This was about ending the cycle, once and for all. "I will not be giving the car back, Mom," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "But I will make a deal with Mr. Henderson, and with you, and you're not going to like it one bit." A stunned silence met my words, broken only by my mother's ragged, hiccuping breaths. What do you mean?" she stammered. "What deal?" "Here's what's going to happen," I said, pacing the small loft apartment, the plan crystallizing with every word. I felt a strange, detached clarity, like a general moving pieces on a battlefield. "You are going to call Henderson. You are going to tell him that I, the delinquent thief, am willing to meet him. Tomorrow, noon, in a very public place. The main parking lot of the city center mall. And I am willing to discuss a solution." "A public place? Why?" "Because I don't trust him, and frankly, I don't trust you. I want witnesses. Tell him to come alone. You and Dad and Chloe are to come as well. You will all be part of this negotiation." "Negotiation? What is there to negotiate?" "He just wants his money back so he can give back the car," she insisted, her voice rising in frustration. "That deal is no longer on the table," I said coldly. "He wanted to play business. Now we're going to do business. The price has gone up. You created this mess, Mom. All of you. Tomorrow you're all going to help me clean it up, on my terms. Be there. Don't be late." I hung up before she could argue, my hand trembling slightly. I immediately called Mark and told him the plan. The mall parking lot? Bold, he said, a note of admiration in his voice. Very public. He won't be able to try anything stupid. What's your play? He has the title, I said. That's his only piece of leverage. I have the car, and I have public opinion. I think that makes us even. I'm not just going to let him return it. I'm going to buy my car back from him. Mark was silent for a second. With what money? You don't have that kind of cash. No, I don't, I replied, a grim smile touching my lips. But my parents do. Or rather, they have access to it. The next morning, I drove Ruby out of the barn and into the bright sunlight. The hour-long drive to the city was completely different from the panicked flight 2 nights before. I felt calm, centered, and in control. I wasn't a fugitive anymore. Thanks to Mark's story, I was a local celebrity. As I drove down the main boulevard, people stared. They pointed. A guy in a pickup truck pulled up next to me at a red light, honked, and gave me a massive thumbs up. "Go get 'em, kid," he yelled. The feeling was intoxicating. I pulled into the mall parking lot at exactly 11:55 a.m. and chose a spot right in the center, far from any other cars. It felt like a dueling ground. A few minutes later, 2 cars pulled in from opposite ends of the lot, Henderson's silver Porsche and my dad's sensible gray sedan. They parked a respectful distance away, their occupants getting out and regarding me and my Mustang like we were some kind of dangerous, unpredictable animal. Henderson looked awful. He had dark circles under his eyes, and his expensive suit was rumpled. He was holding a manila folder, which I knew contained the title. My parents looked shattered. My dad's face was a stony mask, but my mother looked like she had aged 10 years. And Chloe was a mess. Her face was puffy from crying, her hair was a wreck, and she was glaring at me with a venomous hatred that was almost pure in its intensity. For the first time she wasn't getting her way, and the shock was breaking her. I got out of the car and leaned against the driver's side door, folding my arms. I didn't say a word. I just waited. "All right, you've had your fun," Henderson blustered, taking a step forward. "This whole thing has been a disaster. I've got your parents' $20,000. Give me the car. I'll sign the title back over, and we can all pretend this nightmare never happened." "That's not going to happen," I said, my voice carrying easily in the quiet lot. "You wanted to buy a '69 Fastback. You were right, the desperate family friend price was $20,000, but I'm not desperate, and I'm no friend, so the price is different. The market value you quoted me in your garage was $75,000. I think that's a fair price, don't you?" Henderson's jaw dropped. 75. Are you insane? I'm not paying you $75,000 for a car I already own. You don't own it, I said calmly. You possess a piece of paper. I possess the car, and the hearts and minds of every person in this city who has read the news, so let's reconsider. You're going to sign that title over to me, right now. In return, I will not sue you for conspiracy to commit fraud, for knowingly purchasing an asset you knew was not my parents' to sell. I will call my cousin, the journalist, and have him post an update to the story, saying you have done the right thing and returned the car to its rightful owner. Your reputation will get a much-needed boost. Your Yelp page might even recover. He stared at me, his face turning that familiar blotchy red. And the 20,000. I'm just supposed to eat that? Oh no, I said, turning my gaze to my family. You'll get your money back. Just not from me. I looked directly at my father. Dad, you're going to take out a home equity loan for $75,000. What? My father stammered, his face going pale. Son, we can't do that. The bank. You will figure it out, I cut him off, my voice like ice. 20,000 of that will go to Mr. Henderson to reimburse him for his troubles. The remaining 55,000 will be transferred to me. 55,000, my mother shrieked. Why on earth would we give you $55,000? Consider it payment, I said, my gaze sweeping over all three of them. Payment for the car, payment for the 5 years of my life I spent building it, payment for the years of being your personal ATM, and payment for the emotional distress of having my own family sell my soul to fund a Bali vacation. This is extortion, Chloe finally screamed, finding her voice. You're extorting your own family. This is all your fault. You and your stupid rusty car. No, Chloe, I said, taking a step towards them, my voice dropping. This is a reckoning. For years you three have operated as a unit, and I have been the outlier, the resource to be tapped. Now the bill has come due. You will get the loan. You will pay Henderson. You will pay me. And then? I took a deep breath, the next words feeling momentous. I'm done. I want nothing more to do with any of you. I looked from my father's horrified face to my mother's tear-streaked one, to my sister's, which was twisted in a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. I had them. I had finally completely cornered them. They had no choice. The public pressure was too immense, their guilt too obvious. For the first time in my life, I held all the cards. But as I watched my sister's eyes narrow, a flicker of something other than hatred crossed her face. It was calculation. A nasty, cunning idea was forming behind those teary eyes. "Fine," she spat out, her voice dripping with venom. "Fine. You want to ruin our lives? You want to be paid. You'll get your stupid money." She pulled out her phone, her thumbs moving furiously. "But you're not the only one with a story to tell." My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification. Chloe had just tagged me in a new Instagram post, a photo of her, face blotchy and tear-stained, with a long, rambling caption. My blood ran cold as I read the first sentence. "I'm so sorry it has come to this, but I can no longer stay silent about the years of emotional abuse my brother has put me and my family through." My world tilted on its axis. For a split second, her words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Emotional abuse? The accusation was so ludicrous, so far from the truth, that my mind struggled to even process it. I looked up from my phone, a stunned, disbelieving laugh escaping my lips. I saw the triumphant, venomous smirk on Chloe's face and the flicker of renewed hope in my parents' eyes. This was her move, her final, desperate, scorched earth gambit. If she couldn't be the spiritual victim, she would be the abused one. But the panic lasted only a moment. It was replaced by a cold, final clarity. She had overplayed her hand. She thought she could hijack the narrative, spin a web of lies to make herself the sympathetic figure. But she had forgotten one crucial thing. I had the truth. And I had the receipts. Henderson, seeing his potential escape route, immediately latched on. "See?" he blustered, gesturing at Chloe. "It's a troubled family. This kid is unstable. I'm the real victim here." I held up a hand, silencing him. I didn't even look at him. My eyes were locked on Chloe. "Are you sure you want to do this?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "Because there's no coming back from this, Chloe. You're about to burn the last bridge. I'm giving you one chance to delete that post and walk away." "Why would I?" she sneered, emboldened by my parents' silent support. "People deserve to know the real story. How you've always been jealous of me, how you've used money to control us, how your obsession with that stupid car made you cold and distant." "Okay," I said, cutting her off. I turned to my cousin Mark, who I had arranged to have waiting in a car on the far side of the lot, just in case. I gave him a slight nod. He nodded back, a grim look on his face, and began typing on his laptop. "What was that?" my dad asked, looking nervous. "That," I said, turning my attention back to my family, "was me, taking off the kid gloves." I pulled out my own phone. "You see, Chloe, you think this is a game of who can tell the saddest story. But this is a game of evidence. In your post, you're making some very serious, very specific, and very defamatory accusations. You're claiming I'm an abuser. That's a crime. And false accusations are also a crime." I opened the folder on my phone that Mark and I had prepared, the one we had held back, the insurance policy. "You say I was emotionally abusive and controlling with money," I began, my voice clear and steady, projecting across the parking lot. "Yet here are dozens of text messages, dating back 5 years, of you and Mom and Dad asking me for money. Not the other way around. Here are the bank transfers, totaling over $30,000 over that period, sent with no strings attached. Would an abuser do that? Or would a doormat?" Chloe's face began to lose its color. "You claim I was cold and distant because of my obsession. Here are photos of me at every one of your art shows, Chloe. Here I am helping Dad move his office. Here I am fixing the garbage disposal Mom broke. Here's the text where I offered to pay for you to see a real, licensed therapist instead of your TikTok guru, an offer you declined. You weren't neglected. You were enabled. I wasn't distant. I was just the only adult in the room. I took a step closer, my parents and sister instinctively taking a step back. And now for the grand finale, the Bali trip. You see, the article Mark published was actually the gentle version. We framed you all as misguided. But I have the text where you, Mom, explicitly told Dad to just sell the car while he's gone. He'll get over it. I have the text from you, Chloe, to your friend, bragging that you finally convinced Daddy to liquidate the rust bucket so you could go find yourself. And Mr. Henderson," I turned to him, and he physically flinched. "I have the timestamp security camera footage from my neighbor across the street. showing you coming to inspect the car 3 days before I even left for my work trip. You and my father planned this. This wasn't a desperate, spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a premeditated conspiracy. The silence in the parking lot was absolute. Henderson's face was ashen. My father looked like he was going to be sick. My mother was openly weeping, but this time it felt real. Chloe was staring at me, her mouth hanging open, all the fight gone from her eyes, replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. She had just realized she'd brought a knife to a gunfight, and I had just revealed a tank. My cousin Mark is, as we speak, uploading all of this as a follow-up to the original story, I said, along with a copy of your new Instagram post, Chloe, showcasing your attempt at malicious character assassination. Or, I paused, letting the weight of the word hang in the air. He can delete it, and you can delete yours. I looked at my father. The deal stands. You secure the loan. You pay Henderson his $20,000. You transfer the $55,000 to me. Henderson signs the title. We do this today, and in return, this all goes away. The full story never sees the light of day, and you all get to fade back into obscurity. If you refuse, my gaze swept over them all one last time. I walk away, the story goes live, and I file a lawsuit against all of you for fraud, conspiracy, and defamation. The car will be tied up in litigation for years, and your lives will be ruined far more comprehensively than they are now. Your choice. It was over. I knew it. They knew it. There was no fight left. Defeated, my father nodded numbly. Henderson practically threw the manila folder with the title at me and scurried back to his Porsche, desperate to escape. While my father made a frantic call to his bank, my mother tried to approach me, whispering my name. I just held up a hand and shook my head. There was nothing left to say. Chloe, with trembling fingers, deleted her Instagram post. An hour later, in a sterile bank office, the transfers were made. The title was signed and notarized officially and irrevocably, putting Ruby's ownership in my name. I walked out of that bank, got into my car, and drove away without a single look back. The story Mark posted was simple and gracious. It announced that the dispute had been resolved, that Mr. Henderson had done the right thing and returned the car, and that I was grateful for the public's support. It was a neat, tidy ending that protected the guilty and allowed everyone to save a sliver of face. It was more grace than they deserved, but it was for me, not for them. I didn't want a war. I wanted peace. I wanted to close this chapter of my life for good. I never spoke to my parents or sister again. I heard through the grapevine that Chloe never went to Bailey. The non-refundable deposit was lost, and without my financial safety net, they couldn't afford the rest. Their house, now leveraged with the new loan, became a constant source of financial stress. They were forced to live with the consequences of their choices, a reality I had shielded them from for years. As for me, I took the $55,000 and poured it into my own life. I put a down payment on a small house with a 2-car garage, my own space, my own sanctuary. I took Ruby to the auto show, and she won Best in Class. Standing there with the trophy in my hand and Ruby gleaming under the lights, I didn't feel anger or resentment. I just felt free. They hadn't just sold my car, they had sold my role as their doormat, and in buying it all back, I hadn't just reclaimed a car. I had reclaimed my life, and every time I turn the key and hear that engine roar, it's not just the sound of a V8, it's the sound of my own hard-won freedom.